Okay, so things have gotten a little hairy in English 1012. Not very many people left, but that's okay. What I want to do though, is I want to try to speed this up. I want to try to finish this course so that we can just kind of move on with our lives. In fact, what I think I would like for you to do this week, and this is a little bit different because again, this is one of those weird peer review weeks that we're not going to be able to do. So let's do this. Get me as many of the memos as you can. Now, the memos are one-page entries, and they're not even really a page. Memos are very, very short things. I've included the memo template. You should have already have written a memo. I think you should even have written 2 by now. So there needs to be a total of 10 memos, and in order to get full credit for this, you're going to need to write those 10. So if you could please just work on the memos and see how many of those you can get finished. Next week, we're going to try to see if we can round out the business letters a little bit. There needs to be 5 of those, and business letters are a little longer. What I'd like to do today, I'm going to talk about several things. I'm going to include a template for a resume, and I want you to look very closely at this template to see what kind of information goes there. Later on in the semester, hopefully sooner rather than later, you're going to need to turn in a resume, and the way I'm going to do presentations in this class is that you're going to actually do an interview with me. We're going to either do a face-to-face interview, which is going to be kind of difficult because it is an online class, or, which I think is going to be much more feasible, we're going to do a phone interview. And the way we're going to do a phone interview and the way I'm going to grade your resume is you turn your resume into me. Yeah, submit it on Angel into the Dropbox, and you'll call and you're interviewing for a job in your industry. Maybe you want to be a manager. Maybe you want to be, maybe you just want to work at a particular establishment, but you're going to pretend to apply for a job, and we're going to pretend that I'm interviewing you for this position. So I'm going to have a series of questions ready to ask you, and depending on your performance for that interview will determine whether you get the full presentation grade or not. So let's talk about this. What do we need to do in an interview? We need to be as professional as we possibly can. We need to be respectful. We need to be courteous. We need to speak with very clear diction. We need to be very to the point. And we want to have friendly rapport, but at the same time, we want to consider the fact that we are applying for a position. So why don't we do a little discussion on this week? Like, if we're applying for a position and it's a phone interview, what are some things that we should keep in mind? What should you use to prepare? What should the preparation be? What particular facts should you have? You should definitely have a copy of your resume in hand, but what types of questions should you be ready for? And a lot of this is specific to the job that you're applying for. So that's the general presentation material. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to ask you to look at these resume templates, get a general idea of what type of information is there. Writing a resume is really not that difficult. It's mostly just like what we've been doing with the memos and the business letters and the business report. It's looking at a template and it's trying to imitate the writing that you see there. So that's the first big thing I wanted to talk about in this video. The second, and this is something that we used to talk about in the old textbook, is diversity. And I'm just gonna talk about diversity for a few minutes, just explain to you why this is an important concept. In the workforce these days, we have a much more diverse workforce, and diversity is actually really, really important because it's necessary to be sensitive to the needs of other cultures. But the problem is that we now live in a world, and you might want to take this down, we live in a globalized world. We're dealing with globalization. And that means that you have to do a lot of research on your own in order to understand what these different diverse needs are. Let me give you an example, and this is something that has actually burned some colleagues of mine in the past, and this should illustrate for you the need to understand the diversity. In Japan and in China, business cards are handled very differently than they are here. Let's say you're networking, right? Or you're at a job interview, or you're just basically exploring jobs. Someone hands you a business card. What do you usually do with it? Think about it. You'll probably glance at it, put it in your pocket. That is very offensive, highly, highly offensive in the Japanese and Chinese business world. What you want to do with them is when they hand you a business card, that is considered an utmost respect act. That is like a huge thing where you have to have like the correct manners. Here's what you do in that setting. You take that business card, you hold it with both hands, you read it carefully, you take time to read that business card, you flip it over, you see if there's anything on the back, you then carefully take out your wallet or personal organizer, and you put that business card into your wallet. You don't put it into your bare pocket. And it is very offensive if you just jam that business card in your pocket because it makes it look like you don't care. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm sure there are many little quirks like that. And that's horrible for me to say a quirk, but to us it's a quirk because that's not the way that we view business. Like, that's just not the way we do things in our particular business climate. So it's a quirk to us, but to them, it's a custom. And it's something they take very seriously, and it's very worthy of our respect. So how do we deal with these issues? How do we prepare ourselves for this multicultural, globalized world? You got to do a little research, and you got to know your clients before you even begin correspondence with them. It's so important. And if we do something that is perceived to be offensive or is, rude, we need to apologize for it, and we need to be sensitive to those needs when they come up. So diversity is not just a word that we're throwing around that we need to know. Diversity is a very important thing for us in business communication. So one of the things you could think about going forward with this, and I might design some type of exercise with it later, I'm going to write it down, is you might want to look up different cultures. What is some of the business etiquette practices in China and in Japan? What are some of the different practices in Mexico? Do the Germans have different practices? Now, where do you go to get information like that? Are you going to go to Google? Are you going to go to Wikipedia? It's actually a good question, right? So, looks like me as your instructor, I might have some work to do to actually give you some resources to look this stuff up. And I'm going to work on that. Now, for today's lesson, I just want you to understand why diversity is important. Do you see how diversity can affect business correspondence, can affect our relations with other cultures? It's actually, when you get into the nit-grit of it, it's actually really, really interesting. Yeah, it's really cool stuff. So roll that around in your brain for a minute, and basically, again, let me reiterate. All I want from you this week is I really want you to try to finish those memos. Let's see if we could just get that done. And next week we're going to go on to the business letters. It might seem like a lot of work, but remember, as long as you follow that template, you give me those tiny little blurbs in the memos, that's all you have to do. And with the memos themselves, what types of situations do you put in a memo? You put requests, you put directions, you put announcements. And these things need to somehow be contained in your topic with your industry. Now, if you're having trouble with the topics for these memos, oh my gosh, what am I going to put in my memos? Contact me, send me an email, we'll brainstorm it together. But that's what I want you to do for this week. Let's see if we can finish this out. Thanks a lot, and good luck with everything.